Welcome to a journey back in time to the historic Hastings tournament of the winter of 1979. The air inside the playing hall is thick with concentration, heavy with the quiet tension that only a grandmaster clash can evoke. On one side of the board sits Robert Bellin, a deeply knowledgeable British master known for his sharp tactical eye and unorthodox strategic conceptions. Across from him sits a young, rising American star whose name would soon become synonymous with elegance, fluidity, and profound positional mastery, Yasser Seirawan. This matchup promises an intellectual duel of the highest order, a canvas where White's aggressive spatial ambitions will collide directly with Black's legendary resilience. The battle begins with the bold advancement of the White King's pawn to e4, a classic opening gesture that stakes an immediate claim to the vital central territory of the board. Seirawan offers a cool, measured reply, nudging his pawn forward to c6. This is the definitive hallmark of the Caro-Kann defense, an opening favored by players who prize structural integrity, deep defensive resilience, and the slow, agonizing constriction of an overextended opponent. Bellin accepts the challenge for central supremacy without a moment's hesitation, marching his queen's pawn forward to d4. Now, White possesses the idealized classical pawn duo, commanding the critical central squares and opening clear pathways for both of his bishops to enter the fray. It is a visually imposing center, but Seirawan is entirely unfazed. True to the spirit of his opening choice, the American strikes back immediately, driving his own queen's pawn straight up to d5. The central tension is instantly established, a direct mathematical confrontation between the two armies. White must now decide whether to protect his e4 pawn, capture on d5, or push past the enemy lines to lock the center down. Bellin chooses the most ambitious and space-gaining option available, thrusting his king's pawn forward to e5. We have entered the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann. By locking the center, White gains a permanent spatial advantage on the kingside and clamps down on Black's natural development squares. In similar openings, like the French defense, this pawn push permanently traps the black light-squared bishop behind its own pawn chain, but the genius of the Caro-Kann is revealed on the very next move. Seirawan elegantly glides his light-squared bishop out of the pawn camp, planting it firmly on the active f5 square. Bellin develops his king's knight to e2. This is a subtle, twisting maneuver. The knight does not take its traditional post on f3, but instead prepares to swing over to the kingside to harass the black bishop and jumpstart an early attack. Seirawan pushes his pawn to e6. With this move, Black completes a rock-solid, dark-squared pawn pyramid that safeguards his king, even though it finally closes the door behind the light-squared bishop. Bellin wastes no time in executing his plan, bounding his knight from e2 over to g3. The white knight now stares directly at the black bishop on f5, demanding a concession. Seirawan simply slides his bishop back one square to g6. The bishop remains on the long diagonal, safe for the moment, but acting as a lightning rod for White's aggressive intentions. Bellin, eager to seize the initiative on the flank, unleashes a violent expansion, marching his king's rook pawn forward to h4. This is an explicit threat to play h5 on the next move, which would completely trap and suffocate the black bishop on g6. Seirawan, reading his opponent's intentions perfectly, meets the threat with cold precision, advancing his own king's rook pawn to h5. This high-stakes pawn duel freezes the kingside structure, stopping White's immediate pawn storm but leaving a complex, delicate web of weaknesses around both kings. Bellin brings his king's bishop out to e2. The bishop eyes the freshly advanced h5 pawn, hinting at future tactical sacrifices or pressure on the kingside. But Seirawan knows that the antidote to a premature flank attack is a crushing counterstrike in the center. He aggressively drives his c-pawn forward to c5, tearing at the foundations of White's proud d4 pawn. Bellin commits a highly aggressive, deeply committing positional decision. He pushes his f-pawn forward to f4. This move is designed to throw an extra layer of protection onto the e5 pawn and create a massive wall of infantry on the kingside, but it leaves behind a trail of permanent structural wounds, severely weakening the squares around the white king. Seirawan recognizes the strategic trade-off instantly. He develops his queen's knight to c6, stepping into the central battle and piling a third layer of attacking pressure onto the vulnerable d4 pawn. The pressure on the center becomes too much for Bellin to comfortably maintain, and he blinks first, choosing to abandon his central stronghold. White plays pawn takes c5, capturing the black pawn but relinquishing his grip on the center. Seirawan's dark-squared bishop, which had been waiting patiently on f8, leaps forward to reclaim the piece, capturing the pawn on c5. Bellin, feeling the heat mounting along that dangerous diagonal, attempts to neutralize the black bishop by developing his own queen's bishop to d3, offering an immediate trade of pieces to relieve the pressure. But Seirawan is not interested in giving his opponent an easy way out. Rather than trading, the American Grandmaster launches an aggressive queen maneuver, swinging his queen out to b6. This creates a deadly, highly coordinated battery. The queen on b6 and the bishop on c5 are now working in perfect, malicious harmony, both zeroing in on the undefended f2 square. White's king is suddenly in imminent danger before he has even had a chance to find a safe haven. Faced with the terrifying prospect of an immediate disaster on f2, Bellin is forced into an awkward, unnatural defensive posture. He slides his king's rook over to f1. By moving the rook, White forfeits the right to castle forever, meaning his king is doomed to remain in the center of the board for the foreseeable future. Seirawan, possessed of an extraordinary sense of harmony, spots a new target created by the rook's sudden relocation. He drops his dark-squared bishop all the way back to e7. This quiet, venomous retreat uncovers a direct attack on the white h4 pawn, which has suddenly lost its protector. Bellin is forced to undo his previous defensive work, retreating his king's rook all the way back to h1 to save the h4 pawn. This total loss of time, shuffling the rook back and forth, is disastrous in an open, tactical game. Seirawan ruthlessly capitalizes on this sluggishness, developing his remaining knight to h6. The knight bounces toward the rim, but its true destination is far more sinister. It is heading directly for the g4 square, from which it can launch a devastating assault on the white position. Bellin, desperate to eliminate at least one of black's attacking pieces, finally pulls the trigger on the bishop trade, playing his bishop takes g6 on the kingside. Seirawan recaptures effortlessly, playing his f-pawn takes g6. While this gives black doubled pawns on the g-file, it is an enormous strategic triumph. The capture completely opens up the file for black's rooks, creating a highway of attack directed straight at the heart of white's uncastled king. Hoping to stabilize his collapsing center and prevent any sudden breakthroughs, Bellin nudges his c-pawn forward to c3, trying to build a modest defensive barrier, but the black storm cannot be contained. Seirawan's knight arrives at its dream destination, leaping forcefully to g4. The knight on g4 is an absolute monster of a piece, casting a dark shadow over the entire white position and threatening a catastrophic fork on the f2 square that would win the white queen or rook. Bellin is forced to move his queen to e2, placing her directly in front of her king to act as a human shield for the critical f2 square. With the white defense completely tied down and passive, Seirawan calmly executes the final preparatory step of his grand plan. Black castles kingside. This move is the epitome of cold, calculated grandmaster play. While white's king is stranded in the center, shivering under the pressure, black's king slips into total safety, while his king's rook slides over to the newly opened file, joining the attack with devastating energy. Bellin tries to bring his last dormant piece into the game, developing his queen's knight to d2, hoping to eventually reinforce his crumbling lines. But Seirawan's tactical vision is already several steps ahead. The American maestro relocates his dark-squared bishop once again, sliding it back to c5. The bishop returns to its favorite hunting ground, realigning itself perfectly with the weak f2 square and renewing the unbearable pressure on white's position. In a bid to shore up his defenses one last time, Bellin slides his king's rook over to f1, trying to lock down the f2 square by sheer force of numbers. But the tactical conditions are now absolutely perfect, and Seirawan decides it is time to shatter the game wide open. In a stunning explosion of tactical brilliance, Seirawan plays his queen's knight takes e5. This is a magnificent piece sacrifice that completely obliterates white's central pawn structure. Bellin immediately recognizes that accepting the sacrifice by taking the knight would lead to an instant, horrific checkmate along the open files. Desperate to escape the immediate net, he ignores the knight and leaps his own knight from d2 to b3, trying to attack and eliminate the dangerous black bishop on c5, but Seirawan's calculation is flawless. Instead of retreating his threatened bishop, he drives it deeper into the enemy camp, playing bishop to f2 with check. The bishop delivers a stinging blow directly to the white king's face, forcing an immediate tactical crisis. With his king completely trapped, Bellin has no choice but to surrender material. He plays his rook takes f2, eliminating the checking bishop but walking directly into the next phase of Seirawan's combination. Seirawan's queen flies down the board, playing queen takes f2 with check. The black queen invades the second rank, destroying the white rook and putting the white king under immediate fire once again. Bellin is forced to play his queen takes f2, trading off the queens in a desperate bid to reduce the attacking momentum and survive into an endgame. But the tactical nightmare is far from over. As the dust settles from the queen exchange, Seirawan unleashes the sting at the end of the tale. His knight leaps powerfully to d3 with check. This is a textbook royal fork of devastating beauty. The knight on d3 simultaneously checks the white king and attacks the undefended white queen on f2. The geometry is flawless, and white's entire position is exposed as a house of cards. Bellin steps his king forward to e2, trying to stay close to the action, but the damage is done. Seirawan's knight ruthlessly captures the white queen, playing knight takes f2. When the smoke finally clears from this astonishing sequence of moves, the material balance has shifted decisively. Seirawan has emerged from the complications with a completely winning advantage, leaving white's remaining pieces disconnected, passive, and utterly helpless. Hoping against hope for a miracle, Bellin develops his queen's bishop to d2, searching for any semblance of activity in a ruined landscape, but Seirawan is merciless. He immediately pushes his pawn forward to e5, a move that acts like a crowbar, prying open the remaining lines of the center and preparing to unleash his twin rooks upon the exposed white king. Bellin plays pawn takes e5, capturing the pawn out of sheer desperation, but it only hastens the end. Seirawan brings his final reserve into the battle, sliding his queen's rook over to e8. The rook takes up a menacing position on the fully opened e-file, pinning the white e5 pawn and threatening an immediate crushing check on the king. In a final, futile gesture, Bellin develops his bishop to g5, attempting to create a distraction or pin the black pieces. But it is far too late for counterplay. Seirawan executes the final, decisive blow of the match, playing his rook takes e5 with check. The rook crashes through the center, delivering a devastating check that tears away the last remnants of white's defense. Looking at the board, Robert Bellin realizes the absolute hopelessness of his situation. His king is completely exposed, he is down catastrophic amounts of material, and mate is only a few short moves away. With a heavy heart, the British master extends his hand in resignation, bringing an end to an absolute masterpiece of chess art. What a spectacular display of chess mastery by Yasser Seirawan. From the very opening moves, he demonstrated a profound understanding of positional warfare, meeting white's aggressive flank push with a perfectly timed counterstrike in the center. If you enjoyed diving deep into the strategy and the beautiful tactics of this historic Grandmaster clash, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more of these incredible chess stories and timeless masterpieces to life. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep playing and keep your king safe.